Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And this week, since we're leading up to St. Patrick's Day, I'm going to do the entire Leprechaun series. So today we are doing the 1992 film Leprechaun. Here is your trivia question for today. In this film, what is the leprechaun's weakness? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So our film starts off with an old married couple named the O'Grady's. Now, Daniel O'Grady has recently just come back from a trip to Ireland, where he apparently ran into a leprechaun and managed to steal the leprechaun's gold. Now, unbeknownst to Daniel, the leprechaun actually followed him back from Ireland, and while he is working on hiding the gold, the leprechaun has started taking his revenge on Mrs. O'Grady. So once Daniel does finally come back and sees what has happened to his wife, he tries to get rid of the leprechaun, but manages to force him into a crate, where he magically seals him within it. So now the leprechaun is trapped within the crate for what may be forever, but what actually ends up being 10 years. Daniel is no longer living there, and a new family is now moving into his old house. And this family consists of Tori and her father. So Tori immediately hates this house because it's old and decrepit and wants to get out of there as fast as possible. That is, at least until the local boys who are here to paint the house show up, especially the leader of the group, Nathan. The other members of the crew are Nathan's brother Alex, who definitely acts a bit older than he actually is, and their friend Ozzy, who unfortunately is not all that bright. Now, at one point, Ozzy is tricked to go down into the basement and ends up releasing the leprechaun from the crate. The leprechaun then runs off to go cause chaos in the town until he can find all of his gold coins. Now, while the leprechaun is out and about, Ozzy and Alex end up actually finding the location of where the gold coins are. The bad part here is that ends up drawing the leprechaun back to the house. So will Tori and her newfound friends be able to protect themselves from this mini menace? Or will the leprechaun not only get his gold back, but also some revenge? This film was written and directed by Mark Jones. Jones was inspired by a Lucky Charms commercial into making an evil story about a leprechaun. Jones even wanted to make a nod towards that by having the cereal appear in the film, but couldn't get the rights, so that's why you see a box of Lucky Clovers. This movie was actually the first film made by Trimark Pictures. Trimark, by the way, was hoping for something that was going to be like A Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, while Jones was hoping for something more like Critters or Gremlins. So they kind of ended up somewhere in between with something that was like Child's Play. The character of the leprechaun in this film was portrayed by Warwick Davis, who, in my opinion, was the perfect casting. Jones did reach out to Warwick to play the character, but was very worried that he wouldn't be interested as he saw him as a professional actor. Davis actually really enjoyed the script and loved the idea of playing a villain. Also, it helped that he was in a bit of a dry spell since Willow. George Lucas actually received a special thanks in the credits on this film because Warwick was actually under contract with him, and he actually gave Davis permission to appear in this film. Davis's makeup would normally take about 3 hours per day to apply. Davis also felt that the platform shoes were essential to the character. They were a challenge to walk in, but once he got it down, it gave him a very distinctive walk. Davis said that the shoes actually got him more into character than the makeup did. Davis did do quite a few of his own stunts, but apparently a couple of them were actually done by other actors, Tony Cox and Deep Roy. When the leprechaun is actually chasing Jennifer Aniston's character in the wheelchair, she actually had to move in slow motion essentially so Davis could keep up, and they sped up his movements. This was mainly due to the fact that his rubber gloves made it very difficult to maneuver the wheelchair. Did you happen to know that Warwick Davis is actually a speed skater? So when the leprechaun is on skates, that's actually Warwick. One more piece of trivia about the leprechaun. In the original script, the leprechaun actually had a name, and it was Basil. Now, in the actual comics that would come out later, he actually was given a name, and it was Lubdan. This movie was Jennifer Aniston's feature film debut, and it was only around about a year later that she would actually start doing the TV show Friends. Trimark actually tried to offer Jennifer Aniston $25,000 to come back for a sequel. In that story, the leprechaun tries to trick Tori into marrying him. Unfortunately, Aniston refused, but it's because she wanted to solely focus on Friends. During the filming of the movie, both Davis and Aniston got along really well. Unfortunately, nowadays, not so much. And that's mainly due to the fact that Davis over time has really warmed up to the series, while Aniston has tried to distance herself as much as possible, and Davis actually took offense to this. The coin shop that appears in the film was actually directly next to the cafe. Since the film, they actually have merged both buildings into one building, and now the coin shop entrance is the entrance to the diner. The Saugus Cafe, by the way, is supposedly the oldest restaurant in LA County. All of the patrons inside the diner, by the way, are all members of the cast and crew. The film takes place in North Dakota, but was entirely filmed in California. Here's something really odd you may not have been aware of, but there was actual talks of doing a movie crossover with Leprechaun and Candyman. It never went through, which I'm glad because that would have been terrible. But apparently, even Tony Todd heard about this and was shocked that it was even talked about. So, for this film, the body count is 4. You have Mrs. O'Grady, who gets shoved down the stairs, Joe, with my favorite fatality of this movie, being crushed by a pogo stick, Deputy Trippett, who gets chased through the woods and then has his neck snapped, and Daniel O'Grady, who gets mangled and left hanging in an elevator. So, when it comes to the film Leprechaun, this is definitely a classic in my opinion, although it's really not a good movie. It's a little entertaining, and I do recommend everyone checking out at least at some point if you haven't already. I very much was going to give this one a 2, but just for nostalgia, it's going to eke up just a little bit to a 3 out of 5. Now, if you can't get enough of Leprechaun, there was actually a comic book series that is connected to this universe. What's interesting is, there was another movie made by the same comic book company that they almost did a crossover with, so we almost had Leprechaun and Warlock in the same universe. Now, of course, you have plenty of other Leprechaun movies in the series to watch as well, and I'm going to be doing reviews on all of them. Now, if you really did enjoy watching Leprechaun, other movies I recommend checking out, any of the Child's Play movies, any of the Critters movies, any of the Gremlins movies, and Ernest Scared Stupid. Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode, in this film, what is the leprechaun's weakness? And I'll actually be willing to take 2 answers for this one. So I'll accept either answer of shoes, which the leprechaun can't help but stop and clean, or a 4-leaf clover, which apparently can not only harm him, but possibly destroy him. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments. And if you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel.